Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first virtual town hall meeting. One of my goals for 2020 was to begin a regular sort of circuit of the municipality and hold town hall meetings so that we'd have an opportunity to meet on a regular basis. And I was hoping that these meetings would have an opportunity to bring residents up to date on various projects that we're working on and to give you information about changing legislation or policies and things that are happening at different levels of government so that we can understand what impact that would have in our municipality, and also to get a chance to hear your questions and your ideas and get your insight and input. Like everything else, my plans for April changed, and here we are 6 months later and doing a virtual meeting much the same way as we're doing everything else. It's still a way of getting together, and we're all adapting and trying new ways of doing things and accomplishing our goals. So welcome. Before we get going, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, I want to mention that this meeting is being recorded, and I want to make you aware that our plan is to share the recording on the Middlesex Centre website. Also, I'd like to introduce Michael DeLulo, who is our Chief Administrative Officer, and he's agreed to help out this evening to make sure things go smoothly with respect to questions. Many of you have already submitted questions, and I'll be providing answers to those in the section to which your question pertains. So that's okay. But if you want to ask a question, then the process is, if you'd like to speak and you're on a computer tablet or a laptop computer or a tablet, then you will push the raise your hand button on Zoom. And if you're on the telephone, you would insert *9, and this will put you into the queue. When it's your turn, then the moderator will call on you, and you will be unmuted, and you'll have a chance to ask your question. Some of you may prefer not to speak, so what you can do then is type your question into the chat box. So Mike will be monitoring all the questions that are being asked, and he'll let me know when you have an inquiry, and then I'll get to that as we move through. I guess I should now share my screen and show the agenda and see where we're going to go. So share screen. I think everyone sees it, right? Okay. Oh, wonderful. I don't know how to turn the page, move the page.
Use the arrow key, Madam Mayor.
Arrow? Up, down?
Yep, or to the right.
Okay, so let's try another up, down. Is there another up, down? I tried that. That isn't working. How about page down? Page up. Okay. Oh, okay. It skipped a lot. There we go. It's working. Thank you. So in terms of the meeting, there are just a few basic questions I think to address. First of all, I want to talk about where we are now. Then we're going to look into the future a little bit, where we want to go. Then I'd like to know what you'd like to know, and I'll just leave you with some information on where you can get more data. So where we are right now. Two parts to this. I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and our response to that and financial impacts, and then I'll move into the budget piece. So with respect to COVID-19, the municipality declared a state of emergency on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, and that declaration of emergency stays in effect right now, still at this moment. There is an emergency control group, and that group meets regularly, and it consists of the mayor, myself, and the deputy mayor, John Brennan, our senior staff, and stakeholders from across different services. So sometimes our district commander from the police joins in. There are representatives from the health unit. And these are people who are involved in making crucial decisions to ensure that our services are delivered effectively and safely. At the beginning, we were meeting daily, and then as things progressed and some things became quote unquote more normal, we moved to 3 times a week, 2 times a week, and now we're still meeting on Thursdays. As a part of what we did right away was develop orderly shutdown plans. We updated and changed those on an ongoing basis, and then we worked on reopening plans. There was a lot of consideration of different data. There were various scenarios considered, risk assessments, contingencies for Middlesex Centre, and we worked in partnership with the county as well as our local neighbouring municipalities. All through this period, I'm proud to say that we delivered all of the required services. There were no hiccups, and I'd like to think that it was pretty seamless for everyone. They didn't notice that garbage wasn't being picked up or water didn't come out of the tap when you turned on the tap. Corporate services delivered on the budget. They continued to receive tax payments and utility bill payments. Public Works and Engineering stayed right on track with roads, monitoring water and wastewater. Building services was a bit of an anomaly when compared to other municipalities because they continued to issue permits, and that was because we had automated the process prior to the pandemic, and they were able to make sure that people who wanted to file things were able to do that electronically. They could review and check boxes and make sure that everybody was doing what was needed. They also continued to inspect work in process as there was an allowance for buildings that had been started to be worked on. So they were able to continue that as well. By law enforcement was a busy department. They managed the COVID rules and they educated residents on COVID-related questions and concerns. Community services was another area that was quite busy because, first of all, there was a lot of shutdown work to do, and then there was a lot of work to open things in a orderly manner. There was signage to consider and all the health and safety pieces, so there was a lot going on there. Fire services continued to respond to emergencies without any hiccups at all. And those were the external kinds of activities that were continued. Internally, there was a lot of concern to make sure that our staff maintained their health and their safety. So the development and the implementation, the monitoring and the maintaining of these standards was put in place for all of our employees. So in summary, I would say that our municipality came through the last 8 months really very well. Our staff really focused on priorities, and this meant for them the health and well-being of our municipality and the residents, and as well as all of the individuals who work to deliver those services. Staff members were working whenever and as required, and they were working from wherever they were. I found that they were creative and flexible. They leveraged each other's expertise and supported each other with information and insight that helped facilitate our decision-making. They were anticipating constantly, and they planned for various scenarios, and they were ready at all times to implement all of the legislative and emergency orders as they were announced. I think it's also noteworthy to share with you that our staff acted as partners with all of our neighbors and the county and all of those people that they work with. So what they did was everything they learned or templates they created, various plans that were required and developed. If they had information or any of this kind of content, it was sent to others and say, you can use this or incorporate it the way you need. So I thought that was a really good thing to do, given that everybody was struggling and different areas of our community have different strengths. So sharing and working together in concert just makes it better for all of the residents in the county and beyond even. The second part of COVID is I think the financial piece, and I find that when I speak to people, they have questions and concerns about how is this all going to come out the other end of the pandemic. So after the emergency was declared in mid-March, staff started immediately to track COVID expenses separately. And they also monitored changes, and they assessed impacts to revenue accounts, to our investments, cash flows, all those kinds of things. The actual impact of COVID for us and our with respect to our finances meant several things. First of all, we found that certain costs were increased. So obviously, there was more cleaning. There was protective equipment that was required for staff members. So health and safety modifications had to be implemented, and things like plexiglass was installed in areas where customer service would have to be conducted in the future. So those costs went up. There were also cost savings, though, that we call them fallout savings years that happened as we progressed through. And these were then monies that were not spent because of the pandemic. So for example, facilities were closed and there were programs that were canceled. So that those costs in terms of heating them in terms of hydro usage, there was lower usage and there was less heating costs. So those went down. Also, when it came to hydro, the provincial government issued information about how they were going to reduce hydro costs. So all of those kinds of things played into that kind of saving. There were also fuel savings for vehicles. The cost of fuel went down, plus the trucks and the equipment wasn't rolling as much, so the mileage went down. At the end of September, so just the month past, the total for these fallout savings is about $261,000. So that's a plus on the ledger. On the other side of the ledger, again, we have decreased revenues. With the facilities closing, that meant there was reduced contract revenue, and these impacts add up quite significantly. As well, there were measures that our staff implemented to meet some of the needs of our residents. So as a response to COVID-19 pressure in our resident situations, things like statement fees or NSF fees, late fees, that kind of thing were waived. That totaled about $34,500. As well, staff took a look at the capital budget, which last year was $21 million, and they assessed what could safely be deferred. So here they were considering things like, is there a contract in place? Is this a service issue, or is there safety consideration that needs to be taken into account before canceling? Or is there a legislative requirement that certain projects are finished? So when they went through that, they were able to defer some of our projects to next year. Since March, there have been monthly financial reports, and there's been constant monitoring of cash flows, revenues, expenses, and investments. And since March, both the federal and the provincial governments have announced various financial measures and initiatives to help. So for example, the federal gas tax money is something that flows to municipalities across Ontario every year. This year, because of the pandemic, the whole amount that municipalities would normally get over two payments, if I remember correctly, that payment was made at one time in June, and that was to help municipalities manage cash flow, because as I say, if you're not renting your rice and money's not coming in, you've still got bills to pay, and that action was taken to take some of the pressure off the cash flow problems municipalities are experiencing. As well, there was a safe restart agreement that the province was providing to municipalities. And in late summer, our municipality was fortunate enough to receive almost $400,000. So that helped us out as well. The municipality also worked with the county to look at measures that would support our local businesses. And there was financial aid and assisting businesses to move quickly to, for example, outdoor patios instead of going through big, long processes that might normally take place. There was, everyone reacted quickly and made sure that there was a focus on what needed to be done. So those are some of the financial pieces that I wanted to highlight. I'm not sure if everyone knows this. I think most people are aware that the Municipal Act requires that our annual budget deficit, if we have one, has to be funded the next year. This is the only level of government really that can't run deficits and not worry about them. There is an immediate sort of consequence to running a deficit, and that is you need to pay the following year. So council and staff are keenly aware of this potential burden to our taxpayers. So cost containment is another piece that has received a lot of attention. So what you can expect in terms of upcoming financial reporting, the budget process started in the summer as usual, and that financial reporting for the budget, including a cost containment report, are going to be coming to you, well, as soon as the next council meeting for the cost containment report, and then we'll be having the regular budget meetings that present both the operating and capital budgets. So look for that information to keep coming so that you keep abreast of what kinds of amounts we're looking at in each of the categories and how we plan to make sure that we're not getting ourselves into a big hole. So a quick recap then. Lost revenues till the end of September total just over $610,000. As I mentioned, the financial measures that we provided to help residents totaled about $34,500. Community services, the lost rental revenue that comes from ICE and facilities rentals is $475,000 right now. And there's been approximately $100,000 lost in income, interest income revenue. As I mentioned, there's the almost $400,000 that came from the Safe Restart Agreement, and the operational cost savings from the cost containment plan is right around $900,000. So, and as well, the fallout savings that I was talking about earlier are about $261,000, and $3.7 million worth of capital projects were deferred, and that money is moved to 2021. So that came out of the budget this year. As I said, staff continue to identify areas where costs can be avoided, but this is not an easy exercise. It's really very difficult to forecast what a full financial impact of COVID might be, because first of all, clearly we have no idea when this is going to end, or how circumstances could change, or what announcements and requirements of the staff might be made down the road, or how we have to respond to things. So even as staff are trying to stay on top of all of the changes and make decisions to contain costs and provide service, ultimately, we hope not, but we may find that assistance may be required from either the provincial and or federal governments down the road. But we're doing our best to make sure we don't get in a position like that, because I don't think there are any guarantees for anything at present. So, and speaking of governments and upper levels of governments, I wanted to let you know that we are continuing to keep our elected officials apprised of where we are, what issues we are having, the concerns that we're that are bubbling up, and what challenges and what initiatives we are working on in our municipality. A big opportunity to speak to our ministers occurs annually at the AMO meetings. This was a virtual meeting as well this year. And we were fortunate enough to secure 6 meetings with various ministries. It gave us an opportunity to speak to each of the ministers directly, or in a couple of instances to a parliamentary assistant. So for example, we met with Municipal Affairs Minister Stephen Clark and Jeff Yerrick in Environment, Ernie Hardeman in Agriculture, Laurie Scott's assistant in infrastructure was another one, and the Solicitor General's office. So we raised and brought forward a variety of different issues and opportunities for Middlesex Centre, ranging from partnerships that we want to consider to get to share resources and get things done, to policing, to modernization of processes and technology and automation, that kind of thing, to make sure that we can work as effectively and efficiently as possible. And I should mention here too that that's one thing that has become evident as staff and council have been going through this whole process. The whole idea of using technology to this scale probably wouldn't have been entertained if we'd gone out and said, well, we're going to virtual this and automated that. But when it became a need, or we had to do this to deliver service and make sure we could meet each other safely and discuss plans and execute projects, there has been a recognition that this is a way of moving forward in delivering service and working effectively and efficiently, pardon me. And so anyways, that's a little aside, but I think that's sort of been something that most business enterprises and people who are working from home have recognized as well. In any event, returning to our discussions with the ministries, one of the things that we talked specifically about in some of our discussions was our need for a new facility in Elderton and the proposal that we have in place for that. Unfortunately, although we met with ministers and they recognized our need and are supportive, I think most of you already know that we were not successful in moving to a second round. So right now, at this evening, at the time of this virtual meeting, there is no new timeline, no news as far as if, when, and how a new facility will be built in Elderton. This is a project that needs funding before it can proceed, and it does sound like there may be opportunities for more funding down the road. Building infrastructure is one way that governments sometimes try to make sure economies recover quickly. But whatever happens, our staff is ready to submit a grant application virtually the minute they hear about it. Now, moving to our current budget process, the budget 2021, many of you may have provided your views and input to the budget survey. We had a good response, excellent response rate this year. And I'm just going to run through a few of the key highlights and findings here. So we had 43% representation from rural respondents and 57 from the urban. So there was a good split between urban and rural respondents in this year's sample. 2 out of 3 residents responding have lived in Middlesex Centre at least 10 years or more. And when you add in those that have lived here 5 years or more, that number goes up to 78%. So almost 8 in 10 of the respondents are residents that have been here for at least 5 years, more likely 10 or more. The residents were asked about service levels and the amounts of monies that they were being charged for these services. So they responded for all the various categories. So for example, in public works and engineering, that'd be roads and grading and snow plowing, that kind of thing. When people were asked, how much would you spend to maintain the level of service you have right now? 68%, almost 7 out of 10 said, keep the spending the same. 20% of the respondents said, add to it, spend more money. This is really important to me. So when you look at the number of people who either are okay with what's being spent or who want some more spent on it, we're talking, well, the majority of residents. We found the same kind of response for protection of people and their property. So for example, fire services, we had 20% respondents indicating that they would like more spent on this, and 64% said just keep the boat steady and head down the same road you're going. Community services was one where the numbers were a little bit different. About half the people, 49%, said keep it the same. 33% said we need to spend more on community services. So this is facilities, parks, recreation, and playgrounds and that, and outdoor kinds of services. General government, that would be all of the activities that happen with respect to bill payments and licensing, all those kinds of things. 50% said keep it the same, and 31% said put some more money into that pot. When it comes to our fleet, almost 70% said keep it the same, 8% said spend more. Capital projects, 48% said keep it the same, 24% said spend more. So what we find is even in the lowest categories of people saying keep it the same, when you add together those that say add or keep it the same, we find that we're covering, well, 3/4 of the people in most of the cases, or at least 3/4 of the people. Most people are not looking for reductions in spending. In fact, when you look at their answers to the question that talks about the value that they think they're getting from their tax dollar, 8% said excellent, 44% said good, 38% said fair. When you compare that number of people, those numbers, by the way, add up to 90% of the people. So when you compare that 90% to what's been reported in previous year's surveys, in 2018, only 79% fell in those categories. In 2019, 85% of the people responded that way and say we've gone up to 90%. So this gives good feedback that most of the residents are satisfied that they're getting good value for their money, and that basically what we're asking people to spend for each category of service is coming in at something that is tolerable. It doesn't mean it's perfect, and doesn't mean there's no room for improvement. Obviously, there isn't room for improvement because the responses have been changing over time. It'd be great to have 100% people happy, but I took this to be a positive, that things are on the right track and we can keep working forward and providing the service at the levels that they're being provided, because that's kind of the level where people like to say that their needs are being satisfied and they're getting value for their money. In the responses, there were also 92 people who gave suggestions, and all of these were reviewed and passed on to each of the departments that provides the service. In some cases, the services that were being commented on are really not under municipal jurisdiction, and these were passed on either to the conservation authorities, to policing, to the county, or to the MNR when it came to, say, for example, Kamoka Park concerns. People also commented about COVID and had concerns about the cost containment. So, as I said earlier, this has been a priority in the last months and has been largely focusing on making sure that the well-being of Middlesex residents and those who work here are taken care of. But those things that aren't top of the list, either from safety or legislative concerns or that kind of thing, these are the things that can be put aside. So I want to assure you that staff and council are absolutely keeping an eye on the dollars, and we will continue to deal with the pandemic and deliver services to residents. But the asking of these questions makes it very clear to all of us that there's lots of uncertainty about how things will unfold, and what the next wave or the wave subsequent to that, or the timing of a potential vaccine. All of this uncertainty is difficult for people to manage and know what to do when it comes to saving or spending money, and what we can do to make it easier for them going forward. So as far as next steps for the budget working group, which consists of 2 council members and your senior staff. So this year, Councillor Arts and Councillor Shipley are sitting on the budget committee and with the senior staff. This group is in the process of reviewing 2021 capital and operating budget details, and they're going to be wrapping up. And as I mentioned earlier, the reporting on different budget items, and cost containment is going to continue from October 28th, when that cost containment report is coming, right through till November and December, when we will adopt the new budget. So I'm going to move to the next slide. I'm just going to pause and see if there's any question that I don't hear anything. So where are we going? A lot of work was done this summer with getting your input to two pieces of work that have been started and put off, and they need to get done. So then they proceeded virtually after the total lockdown stopped. So, and many of you have participated, I know too. But the first part is the Middlesex Centre Strategic Plan. And for those of you that haven't participated or familiar, a strategic plan really is a roadmap. It's a process. The planning process is one in which the consultants were working with residents to determine what the shared goals are for our community. And ultimately, what we want to know is what directions do we want to take as a community? What's important? What's going to be the foundation for our decision making as council, and the work plan the work plans that the staff develop going forward. So this process started early in 2020 and was, as I suggested, parked for a while, and it is now finishing up. Over the summertime, as I said, I think many of you participated. There were various instruments that were used to collect data. So some people got a mail-out survey. Many of you looked to the internet and did an online survey. Some of you would have attended maybe one of the almost 40 sessions that we had in person and virtual with community groups and agencies. There were service clubs and committees and organizations, as well as council members and staff. There was truly an impressive turnout and participation across the whole of Middlesex Centre. And now a draft report has been prepared. It's called the Middlesex Centre Strategic Planning Process, finding from the survey and community engagement results. And there's a preliminary draft for public comment available online. You should take a look at that. And if you have comments or concerns, then there's a process to give your input. So that's coming. I just thought I'm not going to go through that whole document, but I do want to highlight some of the key findings or the highlights. When the consultants analyzed the results, what they found was that there were a number of themes that emerged from the comments. The first thing that they found was that well, they described it as engaged community and a sense of place. People in Middlesex Centre are people who are interested in participating in things. They belong to organizations, they support community organizations and volunteer. This kind of engaged community is important, and according to what I'm reading in these results, is something that people value and want to see continuing. There's also an interest in enhancing the vitality of our villages. So people talked about a sense of place and opportunities to shop, just a closer connection and the ability to do things to live their lives in all senses in their place of residence. The second theme that came out of this is described as well-managed development. This is a theme that, well, I'll refer to it in the next section too with the official plan, but it's important to people in our community to feel that new development is managed from a sense of pace perspective, and that there's a balance between commercial and public amenities. There are places for business to grow and develop. So there's this idea that we want to have some integrated, but well thought out and well planned. Like, don't do things quickly. I guess a good way of putting it is, like, do it right. Don't just let it happen really quickly. Make sure that council and staff keep these things in mind and work with developers or plans to make sure that they're being done in an orderly fashion, I guess is what people are wanting to. One of the other things that came out in this section was that we need to influence development to include affordable housing options. And sometimes when you're speaking to people who've been here a while and would like to stay here, they find that their homes are too big and they don't see opportunities to downsize to something. And the other example that you often hear about is that if, well, I think the one person commented that I have children who would like to move to this community, but there's nothing here that they could live in, that they could afford to buy as a starter kind of home. So there's this idea that we need to make sure that there are various kinds and types and price points for housing, that the options are there for people in different stages of life. A prosperous and diversified local economy is a third theme that was mentioned. As I said before, the respondents here talked about appropriate sites that, for people to start their businesses. We need to have commercial or industrial opportunities for jobs. The ask is that we are active partners in promoting and diversifying the local economy and making sure that there are opportunities for people to live and work in the same community. Another piece of this economy, growing a diversified and prosperous local economy, of course, brings the topic of broadband internet service availability to all residents across Middlesex Centre to the top of the mind. This is something that I think COVID has really highlighted. Children are struggling to do homework at home. People are trying to work from home. I strongly believe it should be declared a Canadian utility, and we should be getting service as quickly as possible to everyone in Canada. But I digress. Sustainable infrastructure and services is another theme that is important to residents. Again, there's a tie-in here to making sure that existing services are expanded in accordance and with the pace of new development. And there's also the financial piece is important to people because there's a comment or a thread here that we need to continue with our asset management plan to ensure long-term sustainability, and that sustainability piece for maintaining our infrastructure in good order and managing the money to pay for it to make sure that it stays that way is a consideration that I think councils have been trying to work on, and this council certainly wants to continue to be sustainable from both assets and from financial perspectives. So that's really good to hear. There's also a theme that responsible and responsive. So responsible and responsive government is important to our residents. There was a discussion about how it's important to residents that there are strong working relationships and there's trust within council and between council and staff, that we're partners, we're working together, and we need to make sure that that is the way we work together to get things done. There's also interest in this category to continue to expand options for customer service. And I don't know if this was something that became evident to people as we move through COVID, but I think this is a really good thing for us to focus on, make sure that we're effective and efficient, and we offer people the opportunity to get service in a way that's most convenient for them at a time that's most convenient for them too. So a good customer service is something that is important to everyone here at the office. So this process is finishing up. As I mentioned, the preliminary report findings are posted to our website, and you can provide feedback through the strat plan at middlesex.on.ca address. So the next step after the feedback and the refinement of the report is to finalize the planning document and then present it to council and have that adopted as our strategic plan for moving forward. Okay, now the official plan amendment is the other guiding document that is being created right now. This process is a lengthy one, and but it's also one that is required periodically. It's under the Planning Act. Municipalities need to conduct an official plan review periodically. And then again, we use it to make sure that public input and all of the information that yields is documented, and that is a guiding document then for planning decisions going forward. Like the strategic plan, it's a long-term vision for growth, pace of growth and where it will be located, settlement areas and servicing. All of these things are tied to this plan. There was a bit of a silver lining in how this process, even though it was delayed, and how it all worked out, because the strategic planning process had to stop for a bit. There was an opportunity for Middlesex Centre to develop one survey to get input for 2 projects. So staff coordinated efforts between projects, both of these projects, to make things more efficient. And I think from a resident's perspective, you probably didn't really want to do 2 monster surveys. So it was also thought that survey fatigue could be avoided by giving you a break as far as responding to too many questionnaires and essentially getting 2 birds with 1 stone. In addition to the survey, to date, we've already had 2 virtual sessions focusing on planning. And I know some of you here tonight were at those as well. And going forward, there will be an ongoing process where you will be given more opportunities to review findings and to comment, to react to what you see documented, and provide additional input. So as I say, there's been good participation in this process as well, which is very encouraging, because the more input you get, the better is the end result, and the plan is more reflective of what people in our community would really like. So again, I'm very encouraged to see this. Next steps with respect to the OPA, there's more research analysis and background reports and studies that have to be, and recommendations that have to be analyzed and offered to you for public comment. The municipal website lists the phases. The official plan has 4 actually, and we are right now, as I said, in early days. We're just moving to phase 2. Ultimately, the intent is to finalize the document by the summer of 2021. So there's still a ways to go, and as I said, opportunity for you to get involved. Moving now to slide 4, questions. Now, I think some of the questions, so for example, there were questions about COVID impacts on finances, including a question about deferral of capital projects. The resident asked about a specific project, but as I mentioned earlier, they were sorted by whether they needed to be done for safety reasons or because of legislative reasons, or some kind of a contract that was already in place. So if the project wasn't done, that doesn't mean it's not going to get done, and the money has certainly not been spent. It's going to be rolled over to 2021. There were questions about the 2021 budget, and as I said earlier, it was great to see the number of people responding to give us feedback about what you're paying, what we're all paying, and what kind of service we're getting. The one question I had with respect to budget, where we're not there yet, but had to do with tax rates. That will be one of the things that comes out of the process at the end. It was a question that related, though, to the county tax rate, and it asked whether or not I would recommend a change to the agricultural tax rate. And I started on county council 4 years ago. In the last 4 years, this is an issue that's been raised 2 times, and in both occasions, County Council has declined to make a change. Changing tax rates in any one category has implications of the allocation of tax to other classes. So one of the considerations for county has been that we have to consider all ratepayers. And I think the other part of more importantly, the other part of this discussion has revolved around the whole process. The assessment process, many would argue, needs to be changed. And there are also changes, so MPAC and assessment and also legislative change in how this is all done. It's not clear to me that anyone has really considered this up the food chain. And so right now, to ask staff to do another report on something that we just discussed not even 12 months ago, Mr. Colvin from the OFA presented to county in advance of that discussion. So I really don't think it's a good use of staff time right now to ask them or to recommend to them that they do another report this year. So I think this has to be dealt at another level. So that's the answer for now. I won't be doing that in the next 12 months, probably for sure. There was also a question about funding for Elderton Arena. I think I've addressed that. We'll continue to advocate and promote Middlesex Centre as a deserving community for an updated and new facility. But our plan is one that leverages partnerships and meets the needs of young and old. So we believe that if there's another opportunity for grant funding, that we have considered all of the key pieces, and the proposal that we're prepared to present is a good one. So as I said, the grant funding pieces are not something that the municipality can control. So the timeline on if and when, or if at all, actually, depends on all kinds of variables that we can't control locally. It's certainly not something that we can undertake on our own without any help from other levels of government or funding opportunities. I think I commented already on managing the pace of development. This is it came through loud and clear in the strategic plan, and I think it's coming through as well in the official plan review. And I would recommend, and I would encourage you to continue to state your views, ask for clarification when you are reviewing documents. Make sure you continue to participate in the process of developing the official plan amendment, as it is the foundational document for how and where and when our communities grow. Alrighty, I think it's probably close to an hour since we started. What about additional questions? What would you like to know, ask, get clarification on? Is there anything at all?
There's one comment from the public so far, Madam Mayor, just about thanking the municipality and yourself for your leadership. Oh, well,
thank you. That's appreciated. As I say, I think our staff has been working not just overtime. They've gone into overdrive, and well, maybe if there are no comments or questions other that I can answer.
There is one from Dakota, I believe.
Yes. Okay.
Just looking for him right now. Just one sec.
Am I on?
Yep, you're on.
Hey.
Hi, Dakota.
Hey, Aina. I just wanted to say really quickly, so for everyone and for the record, in the way of introduction, my name is Dakota, and I'm president of the Elderton Area Business Association. I just wanted to say on behalf of the business community of Elderton, I'd like to thank you guys, the municipality, for their work during this pandemic. I have a couple call outs specifically. I'd like to thank Ward 1 Councillor Debbie Heffernan for her regular email updates, and CAO Michael DeLilio for his emails with specific local business supports. And obviously, of course, you, Aina, for being available to answer any of our questions and queries from myself and business members. I will say, as one last note, I was kind of disappointed to hear the rejection of the Elderton Arena funding by the federal government. It wasn't something I wanted to hear, but it is nice to hear staff are ready to immediately commence the process when the opportunity arises. Anyway, thank you again to all of you, and your work is much appreciated.
Thank you, Dakota. I appreciate your input, and I'm glad that you have found that staff has been willing to work with you and to help you. I should extend our thanks as well. The work that you've been doing in Elderton and for example, the work with the farmers market and so on. People have really needed to get out and to have an opportunity to have a destination. This is local enterprise that you're promoting and supporting as well. I think, you know, shop local, we hear that in other contexts. I think the growth of farmers markets has also highlighted to communities everywhere that we have valuable resources, food resources. There's fresh food around. There are opportunities to get almost everything locally. So the work that you have been doing to set these up, and this is true of the Kamoka farmers market as well. So as I said earlier, the residents in our communities are volunteers. They're worker bees. They have interests that go all over the map. I mean, from historical things like cars and archives to food, sourcing food local, to entertainment, you name it. We've got people that do everything here. So I think I speak for some I've talked to a lot of residents, and they're just really grateful they live here, and they're happy for the support they're getting from their businesses and from people like yourself and all the volunteers who helped celebrate graduations and special birthday anniversaries. And say in my closing comments, I talk about some of the things that I've seen done, the raising of money and the providing of assistance to groups who've run into difficulties. And as I say, birthdays and anniversaries, and people have been creative. They've rethought events. They've shown concern and support for people who are shut-ins or less fortunate. Things show up on people's porches, or people put things out and say, take this, I don't need it. There's book sharing, you name it. It's overwhelming when I start to think about all of the things that have happened here since the pandemic. And it's not that this is all new. People have been doing this in Middlesex Centre for a long time. It's just that it's become really, really obvious what special people are here and what they'll do to help each other and the vision that they have for our communities. So I appreciate your kind comments. I'm sure staff, I will pass this on at council as well to our staff to make sure they all know how much they're appreciated. And my goal is to make sure that we can keep working together as partners, that we can listen to each other, that we have a vision and that we can work towards it. I don't know when this pandemic thing will end, but I know that the people here in Middlesex Centre are going to get through it. And I know that we're going to have gotten through this together, that we did all of the work together to make sure that we come out the other end in at least as good, if not better shape than some other communities. So thank you. Sorry, I got on my soapbox there, didn't I?
That's okay, Madam Mayor. Next question is from John Santimri.
Yes. Hi, John.
You're on mute, John, if you just want to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yep. John, how are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
I'm well.
When it comes to the survey, is there a possibility to compare the remarks from the rural respondents compared to the urban respondents, and almost mine it for data? Are the outlooks similar, or are they different? And I don't expect you're able to answer that tonight. I'm just curious if that information is available if you mine through the survey results.
We have raw data. I don't know the degree to which it has been. So I don't know if they've run crosstabs on all of the data categories and all the data sets. So rural, urban, or age, or tenure in the municipality. That is something definitely I can ask staff about, and we can see what kinds of insights we can mine. I'd be happy to update you if and when I can give you a better answer.
Okay, thank you. I think it might be an interesting perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, we have somebody that wrote in a question you alluded to it a little bit, but what are the items Middlesex is looking at adjusting from a municipal spend perspective to alleviate the pressure that COVID-19 costs have produced?
So I haven't been sitting, I don't sit on the budget committee. I don't really know what conversations have happened around that table at present. I mean, one thing for sure, again, we'll be taking a look to make sure that any projects that should be or could be deferred in terms of spending, capital monies, I think those would be things that we'd be looking at.
That's correct, yeah. And from an operational perspective, I think we're just looking at making sure that our facilities, ones that we need to maintain operations, continue, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. When we were allowed to open, we only opened one, and that was based on usage. And so currently all the community centers aren't open. For example, the heating and cleaning costs alone would be more than the revenue that's coming out. So yeah, it's not convenient, or it may not sound fair to everyone, but some of the decisions right now are pretty hard to make, and trying to conserve that kind of expense right now is important. So there will be more detail on that too. I think if you'd like to attend those budget presentations, all of the meetings are now streamed, so you can sit and listen to those presentations. As well, I can tell you that our corporate services director, who is the financial expert here at the office, she's the finance expert. She's always happy to sit down and walk you through anything that is confusing or needs explanation or more detail or examples. So you shouldn't hesitate to reach out to staff. They're absolutely willing and able to help with those questions that you have. We will be briefed as well. I will know what's going on in the budget in a short while, but I don't have all the details right now.
I don't see any other questions at the current time. I'll just wait another minute or two.
Okay, sure.
I don't see any other questions right now.
Okay, well, in that case, just before we close the meeting then, I would like to thank all of you who took time to attend tonight's meeting, and also to thank you for your questions. We've got some good ones there that we can work on getting more detail back to you. I do appreciate your time and your input, and I hope that you found this time well spent. I would be happy to hear any feedback. As I say, it was my intention to run these in the different areas of the municipality every 6 months or so. So if you don't think it's worth doing, or I should wait till we do it in person, or whatever you think, I would appreciate your feedback. I do hope you have a better idea of some of the things that have been going on and how they've been handled, and what the plan is to move forward. And I also hope that I've conveyed to you how very pleased and impressed council and I are with the actions that our staff have undertaken. They've stepped up to handle this pandemic crisis on absolutely every level, and I believe they've managed to provide the services to each and every one of you, all the services you depend on day in and day out, and they've done that while juggling new additional duties in ways that they've not done before, with new rules and new policies, and it's a new normal on everything. So as I said, I hope that came through in what I was saying tonight too, that council is very grateful for the team that we've got here. And the other part I wanted to say, and I've already sort of mentioned, is I am very proud and extremely grateful to be a part of this community, because as I said, I've written about this in my villager pieces, and I've written on it on the newsletters that our communications department sends out. But it's been truly impressive to see how this community has reacted and how everyone's pulled together to make sure we get through things. So I don't want to go on forever on that, but thank you to all of you. If there's nothing else to say, I don't know when this pandemic piece is going to end, but we're going to get through it. And in the meantime, I wish you a good night. Thank you again for your time. Stay well. Be healthy. Be careful, be healthy, stay well. Good night.